I can tell you that every time I've had the pleasure of having a TLU student come and spend part of their summer as an intern at the 45th District Court, it has been delightful. I've gotten to know people who have a perspective and bring their talents from TLU, and it's always gone, I think, really, really well. In fact, you're not the only one. I have another intern, law intern, sitting in the back row there, James Reyes. So glad that you're here today. That goes way back to the very beginning of my judicial career to see you here again today. It's wonderful, wonderful to have you here. I started thinking about this topic when I saw I was thinking about the Marines, looking for a few good men, and I was thinking about that movie that has a title similar to that that was pretty interesting, and then I thought, well, how did I get to where I am today? That was kind of what Hillary asked me to talk about. And I thought, well, in my case, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer when I was a junior in high school, but it took me another 19 years to get to law school. So my journey was a little, like this. And I don't think it stopped me, it just slowed me up a little bit. So, inspired by a few good women helped me get there. First and foremost, though, my husband helped me get there, and he's sitting over there. I met him while I was in college and still had these aspirations. I don't think I even had the nerve to tell him about them until we'd been married for 2 years. And now we've been married for 45. He's still with me. I don't know how he did it, how he survived it. But one of my favorite early things was to read an anthology of women's speeches, and it goes back to Abigail Adams. Abigail Adams was an incredible woman in colonial America, in colonial Massachusetts, and she and her husband John Adams was a lawyer practicing law in Massachusetts, and they had a farm, and so she was the financial manager of all their business and what they were doing. And then John Adams got involved in politics. He was deeply involved in the Continental Congress and eventually in all of the things that followed the Continental Congress, right through to becoming the second president of the United States. And in between that, he was in France for a while as an ambassador, in England for a while as an ambassador, both of those places. And so she then became the farm manager through all of that. She was the farm manager through the Revolutionary War. So here's this woman who's managing a farm, homeschooling her kids, and eventually she becomes First Lady. But before she becomes First Lady, and while her husband is busy with all of those revolutionary patriots trying to struggle with the forming of a new country, was writing her husband letters, and their letters between them are wonderful things to read. Very loving letters, and at one point she's teasing him and saying, when you are getting ready to formulate all of this new life that you're going to bring to our land, our new land, would you please be so kind as to remember the ladies? The ladies are the backbone of this country right now while you men are off doing those important things. And we want some rights too, so remember the ladies. And that is a phrase that is something I'll come back to again. But she goes on to become First Lady, the second First Lady. She's actually the initial First Lady who lives in the White House. She moves in at the very end of that term as that building is just finally being finished up and finishes there. And then at some point down the road, she's the mother of a future president, John Quincy Adams. But as a letter writer, I just commend those things to you when you have some free time to read, because she's inspirational. Jumping ahead another century or two, this is another woman that has always inspired me. Her name was Sojourner Truth. That wasn't her first name. Her first name was taken from the slaves that she had been owned by. And she was a slave in New York State. And at some point, she escapes from her master. And within about a year, New York actually abolishes slavery within the whole state. But she never went back to deal with all of that. She just took her freedom and went. But she was an incredible, incredible woman. Her children got sold into slavery, and at one point she was going around and finding and collecting her children from that situation too. Can you imagine the kind of courage that took at that kind of time, and the kind of determination? This is a strong woman. She lived in some religious conclaves and areas. In Michigan for a while, she traveled to Michigan. I think there was a Methodist community that was very focused on religion as a whole thing, and she became a preacher. She had a gift for it. So this is a woman who's born a slave, is illiterate, and becomes a traveling preacher. And she starts going around the country, reading and preaching the gospel as she sees it should be, and as she feels it and as she's lived it. She speaks particularly for abolitionism, to get rid of slavery in many of the other states where it existed still. And she gave one of the most incredible speeches. When I was speaking about her, I used to read her entire speech to the class because it's one of the most inspiring speeches I've ever read. And it's called Ain't I a Woman? And Ain't I a Woman? And it relates to the fact that she was actually at a women's rights convention. This was in like 1848, something like that, in New York. And she's sitting in amongst the crowd, and the women's convention is a gathering of women who want to lobby for rights. They don't have the right to vote. They don't have the right to own property yet. There's just a lot of rights that women don't have at that time. And every time a woman is getting up to speak, the men in the gathering are rather impatient or impolite, and they're interrupting, and they're being rude. Let's face it, they were being rude. They thought these were really uppity women to stand up and talk about that. At some point, she approaches the stage, and this is at a time, again, where, first of all, she's a black woman, a former slave, at a time when slavery is still legal in the United States. And and women generally don't get the podium. That's not appropriate. And she gets up there, and she gives a speech and says, now, it was okay when I was working hard, and when I was picking cotton, or when I was washing your clothes, when I was doing all the kind of hard work that I have done in my life. I'm obviously paraphrasing. But all the time that I did that, ain't I a woman? Ain't I also a woman? In other words, you have to look at my humanity, and you have to see that we have two genders here, but it's all humanity. And ain't I a woman? Ain't I somebody that also should be taken just as seriously, with just as much respect? I'm carrying more than my load, more than my share of burdens in my life than many of you are sitting in this room. And ain't I a woman? And if you take time to Google Sojourner Truth and read her speech, it'll give you chills. It'll give you goosebumps. It's incredible. And so she taught me a lot and encouraged me a lot about